The landlord's men threw the old couple's belongings into the mud, laughing as they did it. "Y'all got 5 minutes to leave, or we're dragging you out ourselves." The elderly black couple stood there trembling, holding hands, helpless. But then, 3 black SUVs pulled into the driveway. The doors opened, and 6 grown adults stepped out, furious. One of them shouted, "Take 1 step toward them, and you'll regret it." Before we begin, subscribe to our channel and comment where you are watching from, so we can bring more stories like these. The world never really noticed Henry and Louise Carter, but their neighborhood did. And in that little patch of old houses, cracked sidewalks, and mailboxes leaning sideways like tired old men, everybody knew the Carters as the sweetest souls walking the earth. Henry was 78, tall but fragile looking, with soft brown eyes that had seen both war and peace. Louise was 76, tiny and tender, the type of woman who hugged kids she didn't even know and prayed over stray cats like they were church members. Most people in that neighborhood didn't know the real, full story. How Henry and Louise spent 40 years raising 6 adopted children, all from broken homes, all abandoned by somebody who should have loved them. Children from different backgrounds, different races, different traumas, but all raised under the same warm Carter roof, fed the same blessings, tucked in with the same bedtime prayers. The Carters never had money, not the kind you could hold anyway, but they had something richer. A home full of laughter, second chances, and meals stretched with love instead of ingredients. But now the house was empty. Their kids were grown, living in different cities. Police officer, firefighter, surgeon, teacher, engineer, attorney. They sent money when they could, visited on holidays, called every other Sunday. But life moves fast, and parents don't want to stress their babies when their babies got problems of their own. Henry and Louise lived in a run-down little rental owned by Mr. Wallace, a landlord so greedy he made Scrooge look charitable. A man with a belly full of money and a heart full of dust. Wallace raised rent every year and laughed when tenants complained. And the Carters? They never complained. They'd lived through worse. Real poverty, real hunger, real storms of life. Compared to the past, a leaky roof felt like a minor inconvenience. But the neighborhood felt the shift. People whispered that Wallace was getting bolder, that he was kicking out seniors and renting to higher-paying tenants, that the Carters were next. Still, Henry woke up every morning the same way, making Louise her tea, humming old hymns off-key, pretending the world was still gentle. Louise spent her days tending to a tiny garden in front of the house, the only beautiful thing on a whole block of dirt and broken-up fences. She would kneel with her knees aching, trimming rose stems like she was touching memories instead of petals. Every passerby loved them. Every kid waved at them. Every soul respected them. But respect didn't matter to Wallace. Profit did. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the row of tired houses, Henry sat on their crooked front porch, tinkering with an old radio that never worked. Louise was inside folding laundry and humming a song she'd heard on the radio 50 years ago. The peace in the air felt fragile, like a bubble waiting to pop. Then a black SUV rolled up to the curb. Henry looked up slowly, squinting. Louise stepped outside, wiping her hands on her apron. 2 large men stepped out, sunglasses on, tattoos peeking out from under rolled sleeves. They looked like the type who didn't say please or thank you. Henry stood, clutching the porch railing to balance himself. "Afternoon, fellas," he said warmly, because Henry didn't know how to be anything else. The taller man smirked. "Mr. Wallace sent us." Louise's face fell instantly. Henry kept his smile polite. "Oh, everything all right?" The shorter man shoved a folded paper into Henry's chest. "Rent's triple starting next month." Henry blinked. "Triple? Sir, we're on fixed income." The taller man chuckled, stepping closer. "Then maybe this ain't the place for you." Henry took a small step back, confused but calm. "If you can give us a bit more time." But the man jabbed 2 fingers into Henry's chest, pushing him back a step. "You got till Friday. Pay it or get out." Louise gasped, holding Henry's arm. "Please don't push him, he—" The taller man waved a dismissive hand. "Lady, he's lucky all we did was push." Neighbors peeked through curtains, hiding like shadows. No one dared interfere. Wallace had scared too many people already. Louise felt her chest tighten. Henry gently pulled her close, whispering, "It's all right, baby." But it wasn't, not even close. The men turned to leave, but paused on the sidewalk. The shorter one sneered. "Should have saved your pennies, old man." They hopped into the SUV and sped off, tires spitting gravel into the street. Henry and Louise stood frozen. The paper trembled in Henry's hands. Louise sank slowly onto the porch steps, tears forming. She tried wiping them away before Henry saw, but she failed. Henry sat beside her, pulling her into his weak but loving arms. For a long moment, they just stared at the street. Empty now, quiet again, as if nothing had happened. "We can't tell the kids," Henry whispered, eventually. Louise looked at him, her voice cracking. "I know. They got their own lives now," Henry said softly. "Families, responsibilities. We won't burden them." Louise nodded slowly, resting her head on his shoulder. But deep inside, her heart trembled with fear. She had lived through storms, loss, hunger, hardship. But nothing scared her like losing the only home she had left with the man she loved. And as night fell and streetlights buzzed to life, the Carters sat silently on that old porch swing, holding each other tight, completely unaware that the storm coming next would change everything. The next morning came too early. The sun hadn't even warmed the rooftops yet when Henry woke to the sound of Louise quietly crying in the kitchen. She thought she was being soft, discreet, but Henry had lived beside that woman for over 50 years. He knew every shade of her breath, every tremble in her voice. He didn't call out to her, didn't ask why she was crying. He already knew. He sat up on the edge of their old mattress, rubbing his stiff knees and praying silently, the way he'd done since the day he learned prayer was sometimes the only medicine a man could afford. When he finally shuffled into the kitchen, Louise wiped her eyes fast and put on a smile so forced it practically cracked. "Morning, sweetheart," she said, flipping a pancake with a shaky wrist. Henry kissed the top of her head. "Morning, baby." They didn't speak of the paper, or the men, or the threat hanging in the air like a quiet storm. But the silence said enough. After breakfast, Henry walked to the small shed out back, pretending to busy himself with tools he didn't need. Louise sat in the living room, pretending to knit while staring at the eviction notice folded on the coffee table like it was ticking. They both pretended, because pretending hurt less than reality. By noon, word spread quietly through the neighborhood. Old Mr. Jenkins from across the street walked by slower than usual, his eyes lingering on the Carter's house with pity. Mrs. Hargrove from next door brought over banana bread, pretending it was just extra, but the way she clutched Louise's hand said otherwise. Nobody said the word eviction. Nobody asked how much time they had left. But fear breathed through the neighborhood like smoke. Everyone knew Wallace was getting bolder. Everyone knew the Carters weren't safe. And everyone knew something terrible was coming. Then it happened. Late afternoon, when the sun was painting long shadows across cracked sidewalks, Henry stepped onto the porch to water Louise's roses. He bent down slowly, knees creaking, and that's when a sharp black sedan rolled up. Not the SUV from yesterday. This car was smaller, mean-looking, the kind you'd see outside a loan shark's office. Two men stepped out, not the same pair as before, but rough in a different way. One had a scar running from his ear to his jaw. The other held a clipboard and looked like he enjoyed delivering bad news. Henry's stomach twisted. The scarred one smirked. "Afternoon, old-timer." Henry straightened, gripping the railing for balance. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Clipboard guy tapped the paper in his hand. "We're here on behalf of Mr. Wallace." Louise appeared at the door, hands tightening around her sweater. "Sir, please," Henry began. "We just need a little more time." Scarred guy stepped forward suddenly, invading Henry's space. "You deaf? Your time's up now." Henry stumbled back a step. Louise gasped. "Don't you touch him!" Clipboard guy shoved a thick envelope into her chest so hard she nearly lost her balance. "Final eviction," he announced smugly. "You're out by Friday. Or today. Depends on how fast you can move." Scarred guy looked Henry up and down. "Pretty sure you ain't moving fast." Henry felt a heat rise in his chest. Shame first, then helplessness. He swallowed hard. "We've lived here over 20 years. We always paid on time. There's no reason for this." Clipboard guy scoffed. "Reason is money. Wallace can get triple for this dump if you two fossils get out." Louise put a hand to her mouth, tears slipping free. Scarred guy leaned toward Henry, his voice low and venomous. "Let this be a lesson. Being quiet don't keep you safe." Henry froze. That line, that tone, it felt like a knife twisting into everything Henry believed about the world. All his life, he thought kindness could soften cruelty. But cruelty didn't bend. It broke. Scarred guy wadded up the envelope and tossed it at Henry's chest like trash. Then both men strutted off, laughing as they got back into the car. They sped away, leaving dust and silence behind. The neighbors watched. From behind curtains, from porches, from cracked windows. Some frowned, some whispered. None approached. Fear makes people small, and Wallace had made them all small. Henry stood frozen on the porch. Louise stood in the doorway trembling. Then Henry did something he almost never did. He sat down on the porch step and dropped his head into his hands. Louise hurried to him, kneeling painfully despite her aching joints. "Henry," she whispered, cupping his cheek. He lifted his face, eyes glistening with tears he had fought for decades. "Lou, if we go, where do we go?" Her lips quivered. She didn't have an answer. "We can't ask the kids," he said softly. "They got families now. Bills, lives. We'd only be a burden." Louise nodded slowly, wiping her tears. "They'd want to help, but you're right." Henry sighed deeply, shoulders slumping in defeat. "We had a good run," he whispered. Louise placed her forehead gently against his. "We're still running, baby," she said fiercely. "We ain't done yet." But even as she said it, her heart knew the truth. The eviction wasn't coming. It was here. And unless a miracle happened, they were going to lose everything they had left. The sun hadn't even climbed over the rooftops when the rumble of a truck rolled down the street like thunder. It was too early for deliveries, too early for construction, too early for anything except trouble. Henry woke up first. Years of factory work had trained his body to rise before dawn, even when sleep clung to him like wet clothes. He sat up slowly, bones stiff, and glanced over at Louise. She was still asleep, curled like she used to as a young bride, her hands tucked under her cheek, breathing soft and steady. He wished he could let her stay in that peaceful bubble a little longer, but something outside the window pulled his chest tight. He slipped on his shoes and moved quietly toward the living room. When he opened the door, a blast of cold morning air slapped his face. The sky was still purple, and the dew on the grass sparkled under the dim streetlights. Then he saw them. Two men, Wallace's same thugs from the first day, climbing out of a large moving truck. Another car followed behind them, headlights off, creeping like a shadow. One of the men stretched, cracked his knuckles, and smirked like he was excited for the cruelty he was about to deliver. Henry's stomach dropped. He whispered, "Dear God, they're early." Before he could call for Louise, the men marched toward the porch with the confidence of people who believed no one could stop them. Scarred Guy banged his fist on the door. "Time's up, old man. Rise and shine." Henry winced at the noise, not from fear, but from the pain he knew it would cause Louise to hear such aggression first thing in the morning. Louise appeared behind him, tying her robe, hair still messy from sleep. "Henry, what's happening?" He placed a gentle hand on her arm. "Stay behind me, baby." But Scarred Guy didn't wait. He shoved past Henry, barging into the living room like he owned the place. Clipboard Guy strutted in behind him, sniffing loudly. "Place smells old," he said with a mocking grin. "Like Grandma's soup." Louise covered her mouth in shock. Please don't come in like this." Scarred Guy ignored her. "We're clearing the house, now." He snapped his fingers. The men from the truck stormed in like a demolition crew. They didn't ask. They didn't warn. They just grabbed. Within seconds, family history flew through the air. Henry's framed military photos, tossed into a pile like junk. Louise's handmade quilts, thrown out the front door. Boxes of memories, wedding albums, letters, baby pictures from all 6 adopted children scattered across the lawn. Louise cried out, "Stop, please, those are our things." Clipboard Guy shoved her aside with his elbow. "You should have paid your rent, lady." Henry's voice cracked. "We did pay, every single month." Scarred Guy laughed. "Not my problem. Wallace wants you gone." And Wallace gets what he wants. Then, the moment that broke Louise completely, one of the men tossed her wedding photo, the original, from 1963, face down onto a muddy patch of grass. The glass cracked with a sharp snap. Louise dropped to her knees. No, please, not that." Her hands shook as she tried to pick it up. Scarred Guy smirked and nudged her with his boot. "Aw, look at Grandma, crying over trash." Henry stepped forward, fists clenched. "Don't you touch her." Scarred Guy turned, eyes narrowing. "You want to go, old man?" Henry froze, not out of fear for himself, but because he knew if he swung, even once, they'd call the cops and twist the story like they always did. He swallowed his pride, his voice breaking. Please leave her alone." Another worker tossed Henry's war medals, the same ones he'd earned with blood and grit, into a plastic bin like scrap metal. Louise sobbed harder. Scarred Guy tapped his phone. "Hey, get a shot of this," he yelled to Clipboard Guy. "People online gonna love watching the elderly get evicted." Clipboard Guy raised his phone and started recording. Henry felt something inside him break, quietly, painfully, like a rope snapping after holding too much weight. As the men hauled furniture onto the curb, neighbors began peeking out from behind curtains. Some stepped onto their porches. A few whispered to each other. Nobody intervened. Nobody stepped forward. Fear kept them frozen. They all feared Wallace's retaliation. No one wanted to be the next target. So they watched. Henry stumbled outside to protect the little he could. He scooped up Louise's photo, brushing mud from the cracked glass. His hands trembled. Louise stood beside him, shoulders shivering in the cold dawn air, clutching her robe closed as if trying to hide from humiliation. Clipboard guy barked at the team. "Take the couch next, and that ugly chair." "That chair was my mama's," Louise whispered painfully. Scarred guy laughed and tossed it onto the lawn, so hard the wooden legs snapped. Louise cried out again. Henry's eyes filled with tears. Hot, helpless tears he couldn't swallow back this time. He wrapped his arms around her, shielding her shaking body as if his embrace could protect her from the cruelty unfolding around them. For the first time in their 50 years together, Henry saw Louise break. Not gently, not quietly, but like a woman robbed of her dignity in front of her own home, and there was nothing he could do. They sat together on the curb, surrounded by their shattered belongings, watching their lives get stripped away, piece by piece. The sun finally rose, but it brought no warmth. Only shame, only silence, only endings. The morning had dragged itself into a gray, miserable blur by the time the last of Henry and Louise's belongings were dumped into the yard. Clouds hung low over the neighborhood, heavy and swollen with rain, as if the sky itself couldn't bear to watch anymore. Henry sat on the curb with Louise beside him. She leaned against his shoulder, her small frame trembling from shock, exhaustion, and heartbreak. Her robe was damp from the cold morning air. Her slippers were wet. Her eyes were hollow. She looked like a woman whose spirit had been wrung out and left to dry. Henry wrapped an arm around her, but his own hands shook so badly he could barely hold on. Behind them, Wallace's men continued clearing the house with mechanical cruelty, tossing the last few boxes out like they were taking out trash. Clipboard guy whistled as he shut the door behind him. "That's it, lock it up," he ordered. Scarred guy twisted the new padlock with a grin. "Easy job. Old people never fight back." Henry heard every word, each one cut deeper than the last. A neighbor across the street recorded from behind a cracked window. Another couple sat in their car watching silently, unwilling to get involved. Nobody stepped up. Nobody said a word. Just like always, Henry swallowed hard and pressed his forehead against Louise's. "It's gonna be all right, baby," he whispered, though he didn't believe it. "We'll figure something out." Louise closed her eyes. "Henry, I'm tired. I'm real tired." He kissed her forehead. "I know, sweetheart, I know." But inside his chest, panic clawed at him. They had nowhere to go. No savings, no car anymore, no support. And he had promised her, promised himself, that she'd never have to struggle again after the life she'd lived. He'd failed her. At least that's how it felt. Clipboard guy walked past them, laughing. "Hope you folks don't melt in the rain." Henry's face tightened, but he stayed still. If he snapped now, they'd win again. He wouldn't give them that. When the men finally drove away, their truck roaring down the street, silence settled like a thick blanket, the kind that didn't comfort, only suffocated. Henry looked at the wreckage of their life, scattered across the lawn. He looked at Louise's trembling hands. He looked at the clouds that began to release the first drops of rain. He couldn't sit and watch anymore. He stood up slowly, joints aching, and whispered, "Stay right here, honey." Louise nodded weakly. Henry stepped back into the house, now empty and lifeless, and closed the damaged front door behind him. He leaned against it and took a long breath, the weight of everything pressing down until he felt like he could barely stand. He pulled out his old flip phone, the one with cracks on the screen and buttons worn from years of use. He stared at it for a long moment, thumb trembling over the keypad. He didn't want to burden the kids. They were adults. They had their own lives, their own families, their own responsibilities. And he had always believed a parent's job was to shield their children from pain, even grown ones. But today he had no shield left. His thumb hovered, hesitating before he dialed a familiar number. Ring, ring. He almost hung up. His pride screamed at him to stop, to protect his children from the weight of this humiliation. But then, "Daddy?" Monica's voice, his eldest, the one who had always been the strongest of their adopted kids. Henry's breath caught. He swallowed the lump in his throat. Hey, baby girl." Her tone shifted instantly. "Daddy, what's wrong? You sound different." Henry closed his eyes, tears building. "Monica, we." The words jammed in his throat like broken glass. "Daddy," she pressed gently, voice trembling with fear. "Please tell me what happened." He looked out the window, watching the rain fall harder. Louise was still on the curb, clutching the wet notice in her hands like it was the last thread of their security. Henry's voice barely rose above a whisper. "Baby, we might need a little help." A silence. Sharp, heavy, electric. Then Monica answered, not with confusion, not with judgment, but with fire. "Where are you?" Henry blinked. "Home, for now, but—" "I'm on my way," she snapped, already grabbing keys from the sound of it. "Stay right there. Don't move." "Monica, don't you worry, Daddy. Stay with Mama. I'm coming." Before he could protest, she hung up. Henry lowered the phone slowly, staring at it like it was something unreal. He stood there, shoulders shaking, the faintest glimmer of relief breaking through the fog of despair. Outside, the rain fell harder, but this time, it didn't feel like the world crying over them. It felt like the storm gathering for someone else. And then, Monica, still driving at full speed, was already calling her siblings. One by one, phones rang across the country. David, the firefighter, Jordan, the surgeon, Sarah, the police officer, Miguel, the engineer, Lily, the teacher. Each call brought the same response. "I'm coming." They all dropped everything. Work, plans, appointments, excuses. Because when parents like Henry and Louise raised you with love, love that saved your life, you didn't wait for perfect timing. You came running. By nightfall, 6 grown children were barreling toward home, and the storm was about to hit. The rain hadn't let up for hours. It hammered rooftops, flooded gutters, and turned the quiet street into a river of reflected streetlights and floating leaves. Henry sat beside Louise beneath a makeshift cover, an old quilt stretched over their heads to keep her warm. The cold had sunk into their bones so deep it felt permanent, but every now and then, a car passed slowly. Drivers stared. Some frowned. None stopped. People saw the pain. They just didn't think it belonged to them. Henry rubbed Louise's hands gently, trying to warm them. "Kids will be here soon," he whispered, even though he had no idea how far they were. Louise nodded weakly. I hope they're not upset." Henry paused. "They're gonna be upset, baby. they're gonna be real upset. A flash of headlights swept across the lawn full of their belongings, illuminating portraits, blankets, sweaters, books, pieces of a life tossed aside like garbage. And then, another set of headlights. And another. Engines growled into the neighborhood, growing louder by the second. Not one car, not two. 6 black SUVs rolled in together, stopping hard in front of the house like a coordinated strike team. Neighbors stepped out onto porches. Curtains slid open, phones lifted to record. This wasn't ordinary. This was family. Doors flew open almost simultaneously. Monica was first, elegant suit still on, heels clicking sharply as she sprinted through puddles, without caring for a second that they ruined her clothes. "Daddy!" she cried, dropping to her knees in front of Henry and Louise, rain soaking her hair instantly. "Mama! Oh my God!" She wrapped both of them in her arms, tears mixing with the rain. "You're freezing! Daddy, she's freezing!" Before Henry could answer, another door slammed. David the firefighter, a mountain of a man, rushed forward. His boots splashed through ankle-deep water as he scooped his mother up like she weighed nothing. "Mama, I got you," he whispered fiercely. Louise clung to his shirt, sobbing. Jordan, the surgeon, immediately checked her pulse. "She's hypothermic. We need to get her warm right now." He peeled off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. Sarah, the police officer, surveyed the dumped belongings with a cold fury that made her eyes narrow into steel. "Who did this?" she asked, voice sharp enough to cut stone. Miguel, the engineer, moved methodically, gathering the medals, the photos, anything sentimental, treating them like they were priceless museum artifacts. And Lily, the teacher, gently knelt beside Henry and held his hands, whispering, "Daddy, we're here. You ain't alone now. You'll never be alone again." The 6 siblings formed a wall around their parents without even speaking about it. A united front. A force of nature. People in the neighborhood watched silently, stunned. No one had ever seen the Carter kids together like this before, not since they were teenagers. Then, a black pickup truck screeched to a halt. Wallace's 2 men spilled out, smirking until they saw what had arrived. Monica stood up slowly, wiping rain from her face, the fury in her eyes unmistakable. "You," clipboard guy cleared his throat nervously. "Ma'am, we're just doing our job." David stepped forward. Your job is throwing an elderly couple out in the cold without a legal eviction?" Scarred guy spat to the side. "They didn't pay rent." Jordan raised an eyebrow. "Rent that was illegally raised and never documented?" Sarah flashed her badge. "You want to lie again? Go ahead. I dare you." Wallace's men froze. David set Louise down in the back seat of an SUV so she could warm up with the heater before turning back to the men. He cracked his knuckles. Miguel stood beside him. "I suggest you choose your next words very carefully." The men backed up a step, then another. Neighbors started whispering. "Who are these people? Are those their kids?" "Oh, this landlord is done." Clipboard guy attempted a shaky grin. Look, we didn't mean no harm." Monica's voice cut like a blade. "I'm an attorney. This is elder abuse, unlawful eviction, harassment. And I bet there's fraud involved too." Scarred guy swallowed hard. We were just following orders." Sarah stepped closer, badge shining even in the rain. "You followed illegal orders. And that makes you responsible too." The men exchanged a panicked glance. "Where's Wallace?" Monica demanded. Clipboard guy raised his hands like surrender. He's on his way." David smirked. "Good, we'll wait." And they did. 10 minutes later, A luxury car pulled up fast, horn blaring. Wallace jumped out, drenched but defiant. "What's the meaning of this? You can't block the damn street." Then he saw the Carter's children. His smirk collapsed. Monica stepped forward. "Mr. Wallace, your eviction was illegal." Sarah added, "Your threats were criminal." Jordan pointed to Louise in the SUV. "You sent her into medical shock." David folded his arms. "You pushed my father." And Lily stepped closer, her gentle voice shaking with anger. "You shattered the very home they built for all of us." Wallace tried to scoff. "They owe rent." Miguel handed Monica a printed folder he'd grabbed from his SUV. Monica smacked it into Wallace's chest. "We have copies of your falsified rent records. You can explain to the police why you forged signatures." Wallace paled. As if on cue, red and blue lights appeared at the end of the street. Police cruisers pulled in. Officers stepped out. Sarah walked straight toward them and began explaining everything, showing the recording the neighbor had sent. Wallace's face drained of color with every passing detail. Finally, the senior officer approached him. "Mr. Wallace, turn around." "What? Wait, no, this is a misunderstanding." The officer cuffed him. "You are under arrest for elder abuse, coercion, illegal eviction, and property fraud." Cheers erupted among the neighbors. Children peeked from doorways. People filmed. Some even clapped. The Carters' humiliation became their comeback moment. Monica knelt beside Henry, placing her forehead against his. "We're here now, Daddy. Nobody's hurting you again. Ever." Henry finally broke, tears spilling over. "I didn't want to bother y'all," he whispered. Jordan hugged him tightly. "Daddy, we are your kids. That means we help you." Lily pressed her cheek against Louise's. "Mama, it's okay. We got you." David kissed her forehead. "You're safe now." And in that moment, in the rain, surrounded by love, power, unity, Henry and Louise realized something they had always hoped was true. They hadn't just raised children. They had raised protectors. Rainwater still streamed down the gutters as Wallace sat cuffed on the curb, sputtering excuses that nobody cared to listen to. His hair was plastered to his forehead, and the expensive coat he'd flaunted earlier clung to him like a wet rag. For once, his arrogance had drowned in the same storm he'd forced Henry and Louise to endure. But Monica wasn't finished. None of the Carter children were. The officers began gathering statements. Neighbors filtered out onto porches and sidewalks, holding umbrellas or towels above their heads, whispering as they watched the once feared landlord sit powerless under flashing lights. Miguel stared down at the soaked pile of memories on the lawn. Louise's favorite porcelain angel shattered. Henry's vintage record player cracked, photo albums warped by the rain. He swallowed hard, anger bubbling through him. Jordan knelt beside the broken wedding frame. 48 years, he muttered. 48 years of love, just thrown out. Lily crouched next to him, running her fingers over a ruined family photo. How could someone be so cruel? Sarah approached, duty and fury woven in her voice. "The officers are talking to the neighbors," she said. "Everyone's telling the same story. Forced entry, harassment, threats, no legal eviction notice." Monica's jaw clenched. "Good. Let's bury him properly." She didn't mean physically. She meant legally, devastatingly, completely. Clipboard guy and scarred guy stood off to the side, pretending to be invisible. They jumped when David marched toward them, water dripping from his fire department jacket. "You two like throwing old people's stuff around?" he growled. Miguel stepped next to him, crossing his arms. "How about we throw you around, see how it feels?" The men shook their heads rapidly. We didn't know they had kids. We didn't know it was illegal. We were just..." Monica raised the hand, stopping them with a single gesture. "Save it. You're complicit. You worked without verifying paperwork. You assaulted an elderly couple. And you trespassed. Clipboard guy swallowed. Are we going to jail? Sarah answered plainly. That depends on how honest you are in your statements. But trust me, lying, not a good idea. Not a good idea. Both men nodded so fast it looked painful. Rain eased into a light drizzle. Henry rested on the SUV's back seat, wrapped in blankets as Louise leaned against him. Her breathing had steadied. She looked out at her children, standing tall, surrounding them like a fortress. Her eyes filled again, not with fear this time, but something softer, deeper. You raised them good, she whispered. Henry squeezed her hand. We raised them together, baby. Monica approached the senior officer, holding a stack of printed documents in a waterproof sleeve. These are rent receipts, she said firmly. Actual ones my parents paid, and here. This is the lease agreement they signed 20 years ago. He had no legal grounds to raise the rent. None. The officer flicked through the pages. And this? He asked, lifting another sheet. A cease and desist letter I sent Wallace last year when he attempted the same thing. He ignored it. The officer's brow tightened. He's done. Wallace tried standing, shouting hoarsely. Those lies won't hold up. I own this property. Miguel stepped forward, pulling out his tablet from his SUV. Actually, he said calmly, tapping the screen, county records show you only own 3 rental homes, not this one. This house belongs to a corporate trust. The officer glared at Wallace. You're evicting tenants from a home you don't even own? The man's face crumpled. It was sold to me, verbally. That's not how property works, Monica snapped. David leaned in closer. You robbed our parents, man. You threatened them. Lily's voice cracked with emotion. You scared Mama so much she almost passed out. Wallace stuttered, collapsing against the patrol car. I didn't mean... Sarah cut him off sharply. Intent doesn't erase the damage. The officer motioned to 2 deputies. Let's go. He's facing charges now. As they pulled Wallace up, Monica stepped close enough for him to see the fury in her eyes. You messed with the wrong family. Wallace couldn't even look her in the face. Neighbors cheered as he was placed into the police cruiser. Some clapped, some cried, some recorded. A few walked up to Henry and Louise. Mr. Carter, we're so sorry. Miss Louise, we should have stepped in. You didn't deserve this. Louise nodded gently. It's all right. Just pray for him. Henry leaned back. We ain't never wish harm on nobody. Monica turned to them, voice softening. Daddy, Mama, we're taking you home. Henry frowned. Baby, we don't got no home. Lily smiled through tears. That's what you think. Jordan added, We've been planning something for a while. Wanted it to be a surprise. David chuckled. Guess the surprise just got moved up. Miguel clapped his father on the shoulder. You're never renting again. Sarah took a deep breath. You're moving into your own home. Henry blinked. Our own? Louise whispered. We can't afford. You don't gotta afford nothing, Monica said gently. We already paid for it. You did what? Henry gasped. Jordan grinned. You spent your whole lives taking in kids no one else wanted. Lily wiped a tear. Feeding us, clothing us, teaching us to be good people. David put an arm around his mother. Now it's our turn. Monica leaned closer, kissing her father's forehead. You raised warriors, and we protect what we love. Louise cried softly, burying her face against Henry's shoulder. The siblings gathered around their parents in a tight, warm embrace as the rain finally stopped. leaving the street glistening with silver puddles and reflecting the soft glow of streetlights. The storm had passed, and next came justice, followed by a new beginning. Morning light was beginning to break through the thinning clouds when the police cruiser carrying Wallace finally turned the corner and disappeared. The streets slowly quieted. Neighbors retreated into their homes. Curtains fell shut. Camera lights dimmed. But for Henry and Louise, the world still felt like it was spinning too fast. David helped his father stand, while Lily wrapped a blanket around Louise's shoulders. Jordan kept checking her temperature and pulse to make sure she wasn't slipping back into shock. Monica stood close, one hand hovering protectively near her mother's back. Sarah stepped away briefly to speak with the officers who remained on scene, providing a final statement with calm precision. The storm was gone from the sky, but still lingered in everyone's hearts. Henry looked at the wreckage scattered across the yard, the broken rocking chair Louise nursed their babies in, the cracked frame that once held their family's first Christmas photo, the quilts Louise sewed by hand for each child when they graduated, all the small things, the real treasures, drenched and ruined. He shook his head slowly. 40 years of our life just thrown out like trash. Lily took his hand. Daddy, those things don't matter. You and Mama matter. He squeezed her fingers weakly. Still hurts, baby. Jordan stepped beside him. Let's get you both checked out at the hospital first. Louise shook her head, voice soft. I'm fine, baby. I just want to go home. David smiled. Good, because we're taking you there. Henry frowned. But the house, Monica stepped forward. Daddy, you're not going back into that house. Miguel nodded. We meant what we said. You're never renting again. Lily smiled with a glistening warmth in her eyes. We bought you a house. Henry blinked. A house? Louise covered her mouth. You didn't. Monica's voice softened, almost breaking. Mama, it's done. We've been saving for years. All 6 of us. Together. Sarah added. We found a place just a few blocks over. Close enough for everyone to visit. Close to the church. Close to Mama's favorite grocery store. Miguel smirked. And close enough for David to run there if he needs to toss a grown man again. David chuckled. Say the word, Daddy. Henry's eyes filled. We don't deserve this. Lily cupped his face gently. Daddy, don't you ever say that again. Monica stepped closer, kneeling so she could look him straight in the eyes. You took in 6 kids nobody wanted. 6 kids from broken homes. 6 kids who might have ended up in the system, or worse. You fed us. You disciplined us. You believed in us. You prayed for us. You cried for us. You fought for us. David's voice cracked. You saved us. Jordan's voice softened. And now we save you. Louise trembled, tears streaming down her cheeks as she whispered, Thank you, Jesus. Sarah looked at the officers nearby. We're taking our parents to their new home. The senior officer nodded. We'll escort you. Make sure no one interferes. The siblings exchanged small smiles, relieved, grateful. Lily and Monica helped Louise into one SUV, while Jordan and David helped Henry into another. Miguel gathered the few belongings that weren't ruined, carefully placing them in the trunk. As they strapped in, Henry glanced back at the old rental house, the one he'd spent years patching up, maintaining, paying for on time. The home where they laughed, cried, raised children, and lived quietly. I thought we'd die in that house, he whispered. Louise placed her hand on his. We almost did. The SUV convoy rolled forward, headlights cutting through the mist. Neighbors peeked out from windows and porches, as the family slowly drove away. A couple of them whispered prayers. A few clapped. Some shed tears of guilt for not having helped sooner. But most just watched, witnesses to a moment of long overdue justice. When they reached the end of the street, the police cruiser in front activated its siren briefly, clearing the path. The convoy turned left into a nicer neighborhood. Bright flowers, well-kept lawns, front porches with swings, kids' bikes leaning against fences. Henry stared, confused. Why are we... Then the SUV slowed in front of a small brick house with a freshly painted white door and a new porch swing hanging gently in the breeze. Lily turned toward him, smiling through tears. "Daddy, Mama, this is home." David hopped out first, jogging over to open the passenger doors. "Come on, come see." Henry stepped out, staring at the house like it was a painting, something too perfect to touch. Louise took slow steps forward until she reached the porch. She placed a hand on the wooden railing, tracing the new varnish. Her voice cracked. "It's beautiful." Miguel dangled a key in front of Henry. "Ready to open your own door?" Henry hesitated. I ain't opened a door that belonged to me since..." His voice caught. Louise squeezed his arm. "Open it, Henry," she whispered. His fingers trembled as he took the key. He slid it into the lock. It turned smoothly, like the door had been waiting for him. He pushed it open. Warm light spilled out. A fresh scent of new paint and lavender filled the air. Wooden floors polished to a shine. A new kitchen. A cozy living room with a soft couch and a handmade blanket Lily had knitted. Henry stepped inside, slowly, as if afraid the dream would vanish. Louise followed him. She looked around the kitchen. Brand new pots, a basket of fresh fruit, her favorite tea brands stacked neatly. She covered her mouth with both hands, tears falling silently. Jordan whispered behind them, "It's yours, every inch of it." Henry turned, voice trembling. "I don't know what to say." Lily hugged him. "Say nothing, Daddy. Just be home." Louise hugged all 6 children at once, arms barely stretching far enough. She cried, laughed, thanked them, kissed their cheeks. Henry sat on the couch, head bowed, whispering, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." His children surrounded him, like the circle they'd been since the day he and Louise first opened their home and hearts. And for the first time in years, Henry and Louise Carter felt safe. The sun dipped low behind the rooftops as evening settled gently over the quiet neighborhood. Warm light spilled across the fresh white porch, brushing honey gold against the wooden swing that now hung there. The very swing Henry had always dreamed of building, but never had the tools or time for. Inside the new house, laughter softly echoed. It wasn't wild or loud, just the tender, relieved kind that comes when a long storm finally breaks and the world feels safe again. Louise stood at the kitchen counter, her hand resting on the smooth marble surface. She exhaled slowly, letting her shoulders relax for the first time in days, maybe even years. She touched the countertop again, almost in disbelief. "Feels like a blessing," she whispered. Behind her, Henry stepped in from the living room, walking more upright than he had all morning. He set one of their salvaged family photos on a side shelf, the only frame that survived the eviction intact. Louise watched him in silence, tears glistening in her eyes. "You put it in the right place," she said gently. Henry nodded, his voice warm. "Feels like home already." Louise walked into the living room, joining him on the couch. The house hummed quietly, the gentle hum of a place built with love, not fear. The children, grown now, but still her babies, stood at the entryway watching them with soft smiles. Monica walked forward first, kneeling in front of her mother, just as she had on prom night decades earlier. "Mama, y'all okay? Anything you need?" Louise reached out and cupped her daughter's face. "Baby, everything we need is standing right in front of us." David stepped behind Monica and wrapped his arms around both his parents, pressing his forehead gently against Henry's shoulder. "It's good to have y'all safe." Sarah leaned on the doorway, arms crossed, eyes shimmering. "We put the porch lights on a timer and security cameras around the house. Nobody's messing with y'all ever again." Jordan added, "Your meds are in the cabinet. I labeled everything. Blood pressure pills on the top shelf." Miguel chimed in, holding up a binder. "And I made a schedule for maintenance. Filters, painting, repairs, I got it." Lily walked in carrying a handmade quilt, the last one she pulled from the dumpster before Wallace's men destroyed the others. She spread it over her parents' laps, tears slipping as she smoothed the fabric. "I patched the tear," she whispered. Henry looked up at all 6 of them, the children he and Louise rescued when they were lost in the world. The children they fed even when they barely ate themselves. The children they protected with nothing but faith and sacrifice. His throat tightened. "Y'all did too much." Monica shook her head. "No, Daddy, for once, we did enough." Louise reached for Henry's hand, threading her fingers through his. The years of work, worry, and aging seemed to melt from their faces as they sat surrounded by the echo of unconditional love. The siblings gradually drifted toward the porch, giving their parents a moment alone. The door left half open let in a soft breeze, carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass and new beginnings. Henry leaned back, eyes closed. "You know, all these years I wondered if we raised 'em right." Louise smiled. "Well, look at 'em." Henry chuckled. "I am, and I'm thinking God must have had a plan. We didn't give 'em much, but we gave 'em love." Louise kissed his knuckles. "And that was enough." Henry opened his eyes, staring at the new home. The warm lights, the solid floors, the walls that didn't echo fear or uncertainty. "I can breathe in here," he said quietly. Louise nodded. "So can I." Outside, the porch swing creaked softly as the kids sat together, talking and laughing, bonded as tightly now as they had been as children, sleeping 3 to a room in a too small house. They glanced inside occasionally, making sure their parents were okay. It wasn't obligation. It wasn't duty. It was love. The same love Henry and Louise planted in them decades ago. As the night deepened, the siblings filtered back in, one by one, to say goodbye for the evening. Hugs lingered longer. Kisses were softer. Promises to visit tomorrow repeated. Finally, the house fell quiet. Henry and Louise walked hand in hand to the front porch and eased onto the swing. The moonlight washed over their faces like a blessing. Louise rested her head on Henry's shoulder. "We're safe," she whispered. Henry kissed the top of her head. "We're home." They sat there rocking gently, watching as the streetlight flickered on, illuminating the little house that had been gifted back to them by the children they once saved. A soft smile stretched across Louise's face. "We didn't raise them to be perfect," she murmured. Henry completed her sentence the way he had for 50 years of marriage. "We raised them to be good." They rocked in peaceful silence, feeling years of struggle loosen from their bones. Because sometimes life comes full circle. Sometimes kindness boomerangs. Sometimes love returns multiplied, overflowing. And for Henry and Louise Carter, it returned sixfold. As the camera pans out, the porch light glows warm against the night sky, a beacon of love, loyalty, and the kind of family that isn't built by blood, but by heart. Text on screen. Family is built by love, not blood.